It was the dead of winter in Alaska, and the wind howled like something angry. I had just turned 32 and decided to take a solo trip to test my limits, to prove I was stronger than the world around me. I've always been the kind of guy who sought out the dangerous and the unknown, and Alaska, isolated, cold, vast, seemed like the perfect place to put myself to the test. I had rented a small cabin outside of Fairbanks. It was a place the locals often warned people against, telling me it was too remote, too quiet. The kind of place where things went missing and the dark felt different. But I wasn't afraid. Not yet. The first few days were peaceful. I would wake up in the morning to a beautiful blanket of snow, so untouched that it looked as if the world was still being created. I spent my days hiking in the snow-covered wilderness, marveling at how the silence was so thick it almost felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, one evening, something changed. I was sitting by the fire when I heard the unmistakable sound of something moving outside, slow and deliberate, like it was circling the cabin. At first, I thought it was a bear or a moose. Alaska's wildlife is unpredictable, but the sound was wrong. It was too light, too human. I walked over to the window and peered out, but the night was so black I couldn't see anything beyond the porch light. There was no one there, but I had the unnerving feeling that I wasn't alone. It was then that I heard a whisper, soft but clear, just outside the cabin door. "Help me." It was a woman's voice. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I had been alone up here for days, and the thought of anyone being out there in the cold, especially someone who was asking for help, was unsettling. I grabbed a flashlight, told myself it was probably someone stranded, and threw on my boots and coat. When I opened the door, the freezing air hit me like a slap, and the flashlight beam cut through the darkness. There was nothing but snow in front of me. No footprints, no signs of anyone. Just the howling wind and a silence that felt even more oppressive now that I was standing in it. But then, just at the edge of the beam, I saw it. A figure, thin, shrouded in shadows, standing at the tree line. It was a woman, barely visible, her back to me, her head tilted slightly to the side like she was listening for something. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping forward. "Are you okay?" She didn't move, didn't even acknowledge me. My instincts told me something was wrong, but I couldn't look away. The air around me was dead still, unnaturally so, like everything in the forest was holding its breath. I took another step. Suddenly, the figure whipped around, and I saw her face. It was pale, gaunt, unnaturally so, and her eyes were wide, too wide, like something inhuman stared back at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, she smiled. It wasn't a smile. It was a grotesque grin that stretched unnaturally wide, as if her face itself was pulling apart at the seams. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The last thing I saw before the flashlight went out was her reaching out toward me. And then, nothing. I woke up inside the cabin. My head was pounding, and I could hear the wind still howling outside. Had it been a dream? Had I imagined it? But when I looked at the door, it was wide open, the snow blowing inside. I locked it, then checked every corner of the cabin. The fire had gone out, and the air inside felt cold, even colder than it should have been. I didn't want to leave, but every part of me screamed that I should. I spent the rest of the night with every light in the cabin on, a strange paranoia settling in my bones. The sound of the wind, the eerie quiet, the shadows, everything felt off. But I couldn't shake the image of that smile. It was burned into my mind. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. There was something out there, something I didn't understand, and whatever it wasn't done with me yet. The worst part? The next morning, when I checked outside, there were no tracks in the snow, no footprints, no sign of anything, like it had never been there. I thought I was safe, but the real terror had only just begun. The next few days felt like a blur, though I couldn't explain why. I tried to convince myself it was just the isolation getting to me, the wild, untamed land playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew what I had seen. The woman with the twisted grin. It hadn't been a dream. I kept telling myself to stay calm. I needed to finish my trip. I wasn't going to let fear get the best of me. The cabin was supposed to be my sanctuary, but now it felt more like a prison. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, sent a chill down my spine. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was a low, guttural sound, a growl, deep, distant, but unmistakable. It came from the direction of the woods, just past the tree line. I froze. It wasn't a bear. No, this was different, too human. It was the kind of noise that felt like it belonged to something ancient, something that shouldn't be here. My first instinct was to stay inside, but curiosity, and maybe a bit of foolishness, pushed me to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and a rifle I'd been keeping by the door. Even if it was a wild animal, I wasn't taking any chances. As I stepped outside, the cold bit into me like 1,000 needles. The wind howled, but the forest was silent. Too silent. I scanned the trees with the beam of my flashlight, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The growl came again, closer this time. My breath hitched in my throat. The beam of light caught something moving in the distance, something that shouldn't have been moving, too fast, too erratically. I took a step forward, and that's when I saw it. A man, or at least it looked like a man, stumbling through the snow. He was tall, thin, his face gaunt, eyes wide and crazed. His clothes were ragged, soaked in something dark, blood, maybe. But it wasn't the blood that terrified me. It was the way he moved. He wasn't walking like a person anymore. He was dragging his feet, hunched over, and his limbs twisted in unnatural angles. His mouth was open, but the sound that came out wasn't human. It was more of a screech, like nails scraping across glass. I raised the rifle instinctively, but my hand was shaking. Was this man a survivor? Was he lost? Or was he something else entirely? Are you okay? I shouted, my voice quivering. He stopped. He didn't turn to face me, but I could feel his eyes on me, even though they were hidden in the shadows of his face. The only thing visible was that wide, grotesque grin, just like the woman. My blood ran cold. Before I could react, he lunged at me, faster than I could aim the rifle. I barely had time to pull the trigger, and the shot rang out, deafening in the quiet night. The figure went down, but not in the way a person would. He crumpled, twisting in on himself like a broken doll. But then, he began to twitch. The shot had done nothing to stop him, nothing to kill him. I ran. I didn't stop to think. I didn't look back. I bolted for the cabin, heart racing, terror flooding my veins. When I reached the door, I slammed it shut, locking it behind me. I could hear him, that sickening, twisted sound of him dragging himself closer. But the worst part was the sound that followed. It was a voice, faint, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. Help me. It was her voice again, the same voice that had called to me the night I saw the figure in the trees. The woman, and now the thing outside, the man with the twisted face, whatever it was, they were both here. They weren't just haunting me, they were hunting me. I didn't know how long I sat in the dark, waiting. The wind howled outside, and the world felt like it was closing in on me. I could hear scraping sounds against the door, low and soft, like fingers dragging across wood. But when I dared to look, nothing was there. I don't know how long I stayed in that cabin. Hours? Days? Felt like time didn't matter anymore. When I finally gathered enough courage to leave, the woods were silent again. The man, the woman, whatever they were gone. But I could still feel their presence, lingering in the air, watching, waiting. I don't know if it's over. I don't know if I'll ever be able to leave that place behind me. But I do know one thing. They aren't gone, and they never will be. I should have left. I should have packed up and gotten the hell out of there the moment I felt something was wrong. But I didn't. I stayed. For some stupid reason, I convinced myself I could finish what I had come to do, that I could shake off whatever was haunting me, as if it was all just my mind playing tricks. But no, it wasn't my mind. It was real, and it was still out there. The moment I stepped outside that cabin, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The air felt wrong. The snow was still pristine, untouched by any tracks. It was like the world had frozen, not just physically but everything, including time itself. I tried to convince myself to get back in the truck, to just drive away and never look back. But I didn't. I turned toward the forest. The very forest I had been warned about. The forest that seemed to call to me, like it was waiting for me to step back into it. I don't know why I thought I could handle it. I walked into the trees, the cold pressing against my face like icy needles. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. The wind died down, and the world seemed to be holding its breath once more. That's when I saw it. A shadow. At first, I thought it was just another trick of the light, maybe a trick of the mind, but it was moving. It was too deliberate. It wasn't just the wind stirring the branches or some animal lurking. It was a shape, tall, thin, and moving like it belonged to something otherworldly. I wasn't alone. I froze. The shadow came closer, its outline becoming more defined. I could see it now, just enough to know it wasn't human. The way it moved, the unnatural jerks in its limbs, the empty darkness where its face should have been, the chilling whisper of something like a laugh that scraped at the edges of my sanity. I turned to run, but the world around me seemed to shift, the trees twisting and bending in ways that defied nature. The ground beneath me felt unstable, as though I were walking on a surface that was barely real. Then I heard it. A voice. "Why are you running?" It was the woman's voice again, but this time, it didn't sound like it was coming from just one direction. It was everywhere. Inside my head, in the trees, behind me, beside me. It was the air itself speaking, mocking me. I whipped around, shining the flashlight in every direction. But there was nothing but shadows stretching far beyond the beam. "Why are you running?" she repeated. "You can't escape." Suddenly, there was a noise. Something heavy, something dragging across the snow behind me. I turned just in time to see a figure emerge from the darkness. A man, tall and twisted, moving in that same unnatural way. His face was more grotesque than before, the skin almost translucent, stretched over a skull that seemed to smile at me from the wrong angles. He didn't walk. He crawled. His limbs bent in directions they shouldn't have, his hands scraping along the ground, fingers twisting unnaturally. And then I heard it, the sound that would haunt me forever, the scraping of bones on snow. "Help me," the voice whispered again, but it was different now. It was a mockery. It wasn't begging anymore. It was daring me to turn around, daring me to face it. I ran again. I didn't care where. I didn't care if I was heading in the wrong direction. I just ran. Through the snow, through the trees, not knowing where I was going, only knowing I had to get away. Every step I took felt like it was sinking me deeper into something, like the forest itself was pulling me under. Finally, I broke through the trees, and I found myself back near the cabin. My heart was hammering in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But when I looked back, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The woman, the man, they were standing at the edge of the woods, just standing there, watching. Their faces were twisted into those grotesque grins, their eyes wide and unblinking. And then they slowly began to walk toward me, moving as if the forest itself was their domain, their steps gliding over the snow without a trace. I slammed the door behind me, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't hold them back. It wasn't the door or the walls that kept them out. It was something deeper, something I couldn't even comprehend. They were always there, always watching. I couldn't escape. I don't know how long I've been trapped here in this cabin. Days? Weeks? Months? Time no longer feels real. The silence outside is unbearable, but every time I step into the snow, they're there, watching, waiting. If you're reading this, stay away from Alaska. If you find yourself alone in the wilderness, just know, the forest is alive, and it's waiting. Don't make the same mistake I did. I wish I could tell you that I'm safe now, that I've found peace, that whatever this thing is, I've outrun it. But the truth is, I don't think I ever will. You see, something happened after that last night. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt different. I woke up, yes, but I didn't wake up alone. The shadows, they were with me, inside my head, inside my soul. They whisper to me now, not just at night, but all the time. And no matter where I go, they follow. I thought it was a dream, just another part of the nightmare. But I knew the moment I stepped outside. The world felt colder, darker. The sun didn't shine the way it used to. The shadows stretched unnaturally long, like the world itself was being twisted by them. The people around me don't see it. They don't feel it. But I do. I can feel their eyes on me. I can feel the presence of something terrible, something ancient, lurking just beyond the veil of the physical world. Sometimes, I hear the whispers, soft at first, almost imperceptible. And then they grow louder, more insistent, until I can't tell where the voice ends and my own thoughts begin. I tried to go back to the place I thought was home, but it wasn't home anymore. The place I had left behind in Alaska, it felt empty, as if everything was a facade, as though the walls themselves had been hollowed out by the darkness. And that's when I realized, I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. I am one of them now. I don't know when it happened, whether it was that first night in the cabin or after the shadows entered my mind, but I feel it in my bones now, in the coldness that has settled inside me, the way I can no longer trust my own reflection, the way my thoughts are no longer my own. I've become part of the thing I feared. They're inside me, and I'll never escape. I've been sitting here for hours, staring at the screen, wondering if I should even write this down, wondering if anyone will believe me. But I can't stop myself. The whispers are louder now, more urgent. They're in my head, in my thoughts, in my bones. And they're not going away. I've stopped trying to run. There's no point anymore. I can feel the darkness settling into my very soul, and I know deep down that it's too late for me. I've become part of something that's older than the world itself, something that cannot be outrun, something that cannot be escaped. I don't know what they are. I don't know where they came from or how they found me, but I know this: they're not just in Alaska. They're everywhere. I see them now, in the crowd when I walk down the street, in the corner of my eye when I look at the shadows. They're always watching, always waiting. I can feel them drawing closer, every minute, every second. I can feel the weight of their eyes on me, like they're right behind me, breathing down my neck. It's like they've wrapped themselves around me, like they've woven themselves into my very being. Sometimes, I hear their voices in my head, those same voices that once seemed distant, so far away. But now, they're in me, a constant presence that can't be ignored. And now it's my voice they use. They're calling me. They want me to join them. And the worst part, the most terrifying part, I want to. It's like they've infected me, like they've put something inside me that I can't get rid of. And it's growing, taking over piece by piece. I'm not sure when it happened, but I'm no longer the person I used to be. I've changed. There's a coldness inside me now, a hunger. I feel it when I look at others, when I listen to their voices, when I see the way they move, unaware of the darkness creeping in around them. I'm not sure if I'll ever make it through this. I don't think I will. But if you're reading this, if you've made it this far, understand this. The thing that followed me, it's not just in Alaska. It's in every shadow, in every whisper, in every corner of the world. And sooner or later, it will find you. I can't stop it. I can't outrun it. But I can tell you one thing. It's already too late for me. And soon it will be too late for you too.